Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking at a pile of sources that really dig into this paradox. How the tech meant to connect us might, well, be driving us apart.
It's a real tension, and the sources capture it, actually, with that image of the SUPERBLOOM poppy fields a while back. You remember that?
Well, yeah, Walker Canyon, wall-to-wall phones.
Exactly. It was like a snapshot of our times, wasn't it? You
Yeah.
had the shared excitement, sure, but then the mob action, everyone jostling for the best shot, creating content,
Competing for likes, the trolls jumping in, those virtue vigilante.
and just crowds of people, phone heads staring at screens, not even the flowers. It perfectly showed that mix of connection and chaos.
And the sources argue this isn't entirely new. They mention Charles Cooley, and get this, he used the term social media way back in 1897.
Yeah, incredible. And Cooley's point, echoed in these sources, is crucial. Human nature, relatively stable. But the way we share information, the mechanism of communication, that changes dramatically.
And that's what shapes us, more than our basic nature.
That's the argument. These mechanisms shape our collective intelligence, what Cooley called the social mind. A new medium isn't just a pipe for messages, it creates a whole new environment. And that environment changes us.
Okay, so let's trace that. Early environments, like writing.
Right. The sources suggest writing allowed thoughts to travel, detached from the person. It fostered a kind of individualism, helped create the Western I, you could say.
Then came things like the telegraph, the telephone.
And with them, these big utopian hopes, right? Ending war, uniting humanity.
But problems popped up fast.
Immediately, like the need for privacy and chaos. The sources mention the Titanic amateur radio operators flooding the airwaves, spreading rumors, actually hindering the rescue. Efficiency, but also disruption.
Which sort of paved the way for mass media, radio, TV.
Yeah, a different model, centralized, one-to-many.
Which made it easier for, say, authoritarian regimes to control the narrative.
Absolutely. Feedback was limited, slow. Though, in democracies, you had things like fan mail, letters to the editor, a slow loop, but something.
Then boom, the internet. Suddenly it's many to many. Everyone gets a voice.
The promise of democratization. Anyone can be a town crier.
But that's where the sources introduce this idea of the democratization fallacy.
Exactly. The assumption was open structure equals better public discussion. But people like Kassenstein warned early on. Without gatekeepers and later with algorithms feeding our biases,
We end up in bubbles.
fragmentation, polarization, confirmation bias runs wild. That hope for grassroots filtering of bad information, it didn't really materialize on a large scale.
Which brings us to today. Social media, the feed.
Right. And algorithms really taking over, often removing human judgment. The goal becomes engagement. Clicks, likes, shares.
Sometimes over accuracy or even
Yeah.
basic meaning, right? One source said everything gets the same semantic weight, which was no context. A huge crisis and a cat meme side by side, same value.
And this changed how we talk. That friction disappeared. Privacy eroded. Remember the uproar when email services started spamming messages? The need for speed pushed us towards this stripped-down style. Text speak, fingered speech, as one source calls it, sacrificing depth for reaction.
And that quick reaction, low context style bleeds into everything else.
It seeps into public discourse, and the consequences pile up. Oversharing is normal. Algorithms learn that negative posts about the other side get huge engagement, so.
They feed the polarization. Makes sense.
And misinformation. It spreads like wildfire. Repetition makes things seem true, even if they aren't. Fake news is often just more exciting, more shareable than boring facts, meaning becomes a network effect. If enough people share it, it feels true.
Plus the psychological impact. Loneliness, ironically, increasing for heavy users.
Despite being hyperconnected, yeah. And even angst becomes, like, performative, something that trends.
And now we have AI stepping in, deepfakes, automating counterfeit reality.
Stuff with no link to the real world. It gets harder and harder to trust anything. One expert said it makes us doubt reality itself.
Which, of course, benefits those who want truth to be murky.
Definitely. And even the AI chatbots, trained on all this messy online data, they can reflect and even amplify our biases through how they filter or tune information.
It feels overwhelming. The sources mention this idea of momentum from Thomas Hughes. These huge tech systems, once built.
They're incredibly hard to change direction on. They're embedded in everything. We kind of missed the boat, didn't we, on setting clearer boundaries for the internet early on.
It seems like it. So if the system itself has this massive inertia, if it's so hard to change fundamentally, maybe the sources are pointing us somewhere else.
It's a provocative final thought they leave us with. If changing the tech is this monumental task, maybe the real work, it has to be on changing ourselves.
How we interact with it all.
Yeah. It makes me think of Samuel Johnson, kicking that rock to refute the idea that reality is just an idea, that physical, undeniable thud.
A reality check.
Exactly. How do we find our own rock? How do we stay grounded in physical reality in our actual lives and relationships, push back against this constant mediated hyper-reality, this feeling of being never not online? How do you, listening, keep touch with what's tangible with yourself when everything feels like it's dissolving into information?
That's quite the question to chew on. Okay, that wraps our deep dive for today. We went from early communication tech shaping us through those utopian dreams and the problems that cropped up.
To mass media, the internet's promise versus the messy reality of algorithms, filter bubbles, polarization, fake news.
And now AI blurring reality further.
Mm.
The core tension remains. Tech built for connection seems to be fueling division.
So considering that system momentum, the question back to you is, what's your part in navigating this? Is it about demanding changes to the technology or fundamentally changing how you choose to engage with it day to day?